Hello, this is Mike Burek, host and producer of Krynytsia, The Well, a podcast series about interesting and noteworthy Ukrainians from around the globe. Today is Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. Our guests for this episode are Svitlana Oslavska, who is a journalist, and Anna Ilchenko, who's a photographer, both of whom are with the Old Khata Project. This podcast is produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Welcome, Svitlana and Anna. How are you?
Hi. We are fine, thank you. We are speaking, by the way, from Lviv and from Ivano-Frankivsk in the western part of Ukraine.
Great. Thanks for sharing that with us. So to start off with, can you tell our audience a little bit about both of your educational and professional backgrounds?
Okay, I'll start because maybe one not obvious thing about our background is that we are sisters, although we have different surnames, but we are. I'm the eldest and Anna is the younger one. And so the background is that we were born in a town of Severodonetsk in Luhansk region in the far east of Ukraine. And then I studied cultural studies actually in Kharkiv and in Kyiv. And then after that, I started to work as a journalist, writing texts, mostly long form text, reportages, and this is the background.
Anna, how about you?
Yeah, hi. My background is I study cultural studies, and then I go to a master degree in journalism, and then I'm working as a photographer and videographer. I'm doing documentaries, and I'm really in love with documentary photography.
So what is the Old Khata Project? When did you develop it and why?
Old Khata Project is a documentary project with a visual documentary project about rural architecture in Ukraine. For the maybe 4 years, we collecting stories and photos all over Ukraine about the rural architecture, about why this phenomenon is really unique, why it's so beautiful, why the people doing such decorations, or why they choosing some colors, and so on and so on. It's some kind of anthropological work that we are doing together. I specialized on a visual part, on Svitlana with the text. She works with the text. Maybe you can add something.
Yeah, I'll add. We started, yes, as Anna told, 4 years ago. It was 2020, and it was Corona time. Yeah. But we had this idea that we want to make a book, a photo book, an art book about Ukrainian rural architecture, about Khata. Yes, Khata means house, rural house. And then we thought, okay, how we can do it? We need to collect the material. And this is how we started. We started with a long, like half a year journey around Ukraine. We traveled to almost all the regions to collect the photos and to interview people. We talked to people about, firstly, we came to people with the idea that we are going to talk about houses, about the way they build the houses, about traditions connected with this, about the way they live in the houses. But it turned out that people liked to talk about life and all their wisdom connected with life, because mostly we talked to people who are older than 60, and they had a lot of experience in life and the experience of living in the Soviet Union, then in Ukraine, independent, yes, and they shared their wisdom. And often we had these interesting conversations, not about the topic we were going to talk about, but about the life of those people. And some of the stories were tragic, some of the stories were funny, but as a result, we had this Old Khata book, a book with photos and with short quotes from these interviews. And those quotes, some of them are about houses, but many of them are just about life, about death, about how a person lives his or her life, and about beauty quite often, about the way people understand how to make beauty around yourself and how to live dignity life and how to die with dignity also. So it was a quite interesting shift that we had.
So, how has the Russian invasion of Ukraine affected your trips for the project? Have you had to cut back in traveling to certain areas?
When the full-scale invasion started, of course, we quit our documentary work with Old Khata Project because it seemed like it's not so important for that time for that full-scale invasion, and we start somehow volunteering or doing some journalist work. But after I think several months, we realized that actually we have quite good English speaking community in our social networks of the project. So we decided to use it to spread the news, like to spread some news from the rural areas in Ukraine, how they experience that war. And we decided with Svitlana to go to the occupied villages when it was possible. So in the summer, first summer of full-scale invasion, we traveled across the liberated regions and collecting stories. But these stories were not about life, love, and death. These stories were about how the people live in occupation or how they experience this war.
Why do you think each house in rural areas is unique? And why do you think the people who live there are unique?
Okay, what we see today in the houses that we observe and that we record, we see not some, okay, we are interested not in museum houses, not in the house we can find in some skansen, but we are interested in the houses where people still live. And those houses, they present a kind of overlay of different layers, different periods of history of these lands. For example, if we take a house that has 100 years and it's located somewhere in Carpathians, we understand that it was built probably during the Polish times between the First and Second World War, when these lands belonged to Poland, or it could be built in the Austro-Hungarian times, yes, if it was built even before 1918. Then this house lived through the Soviet times and changed according to the economical and social situation. The house could change residence also. It changed according to what materials were available to buy to renovate it. And then this house entered a period after 1991 of independent Ukraine. And then now we have this war again, and many houses are destroyed. Even those houses in the books, in our book, in Old Khata book, some of them are destroyed. They don't exist anymore because of the war. So the most interesting thing for us is this fact that house has this several layers of history, and the more layers it has, the more interesting this house is. And another important thing about uniqueness of every house is this creativity that people put into like how they make their house, this space where they live, how they make it beautiful, what techniques they use, what approach they use to make it beautiful in their understanding of beauty, of course. And this topic interests us a lot. Yes, and we all the time observe how the region where the house is located, how it influences the architecture, because we have different regions in Ukraine with different materials available to build a house, like in the northern part where we have Police region, we have wood, and that's why the houses are made from wood, and they're quite different from the house you can find in the south of Ukraine, where you cannot find any forests. That's why there are houses built from stones, and they look very different. And okay, this regional differences are also very interesting, how these materials are combined, how the colors combine, how influences of the bordering countries also represent themselves in these houses. So it's a huge topic, but yeah, we don't use the phrase actually that every house is unique, I would say, but in fact it is.
How has the reception of the people in these rural areas been to your interviews and the book itself and the project?
But when we first met someone, we say hi. You have beautiful house. Can we take a photo of your house? And then person can have some lack of confidence or some, because you don't know actually in wartime who can be these people with photo apparatus, with cameras. But then after some small talk, when people realize that we are not something, we don't want to do something bad, we just collecting stories and collecting photos, we doing some cultural work. So the people start trust us. So it's we for the trust we need to talk to people without small talks, without explaining who we are, from what city we are, where we was born, where we are now living. So people need more information to create some picture about you.
When was the Old Khata book first published? And is it both in Ukrainian and in English?
Yes, it was published almost a year ago in September for 2023, and it is built in a way that Ukrainian-speaking public and English-speaking audience would understand what's going on. Photos, of course, you can understand without translation, but then we have this short text and the preface, and everything that is in Ukrainian we translated with the help of translator. And in the end of the book, you have this small part. It's even made with the different paper, so you can see just visually where it is. And in this part, we put the translations of all the texts that we had before. So it's not like English translation page by page. Sometimes we have this pattern that the translation is given on the same page or on this second page, but it's in the end of the book. But everything is translated so that even the people who cannot understand Ukrainian language can read in English and understand.
Unfortunately, Anna and Svitlana, we're just about out of time, but I do have one final question. How challenging has it been to produce this book? And what are your future plans for the book and the project?
It was mostly interesting, not only challenging. But of course, it's a big work for us. It's a first book that we made from the start to the end with our designer. Quite hard because you need to organize all production with all your materials that you collected for several years, and then you have to create some narrations that you will live in the end. So, and now after 1 year, when the book is just a live life, like without us, I can say that I love the narration, and I hope the people who can read it and watch it also will love it.
And about challenges, I want to add that we are now printing another, how to say, we say naklat.
Yeah, another edition.
Copies, another editions.
Yes, another edition, a number of copies. And the problem is now that we have this electricity cuts, and it's very challenging for a printing house to make everything as it's planned. And there are also other challenges apart of electricity cuts, but it turns out that making books now in Ukraine is not easy, but there are still people who are doing it despite of Russian attacks. Like you probably know, in Kharkiv several months ago, there was an attack on a publishing on the printing premises, and several people died, unfortunately. So although it's dangerous, people still do it in Kharkiv, in Kyiv, in Drohobych, in other cities in Ukraine.
And where can our audience go online to find out more about the project and possibly get a copy of the book?
they can go to our Instagram and Facebook page. By the way, on our Instagram, we make texts also in English, not only in Ukrainian. It's called Old Khata Project. Khata is written with a KH, like Kharkiv, Khata. And also to our website, oldkhataproject.com, where people can order the book. There is also English version of the webpage.
Anna and Svitlana, thank you so much for joining us today on Krynytsia.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting us.
Thank you.
I have been speaking with Svitlana Oslavska, who is a journalist, and Anna Ilchenko is a photographer, both of whom are sisters, who are with the Old Khata Project. This podcast has been produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. And I'm Mike Burek, the producer and host of Krynytsia. Until next time, that's all for now.